Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Canonical issues on gelatin. Now, in this case study, in the ingredients section, one reads the term bovine gelatin. One knows that the cow or sheep has not been slaughtered Islamically, but here, in contrast to the previous case, in the previous talk, here we know that the animal, that the gelatin has been extracted from a component of the animal which is non-life containing, such as the bones. So we know it's from such a component. Now, here, what happens is, because these non-life containing parts of the animal in cows and sheep, that is, not in pigs and dogs, here, such as bones, these are tahir. So here, and I've derived help here from one or two of the fatwas which I've seen. I've brought a new classification here from what I've seen in the fatwas of the scholars. Here, in such a case, where you know it's from the bones, for example, bones being symbolic of non-life containing parts of the cow or sheep, you know it's from the bones, but you know the animal hasn't been slaughtered Islamically, but you know the gelatin was extracted from the bone collagen. Here, what happens is that this bone is tahir. But first, it has to be substantiated before you whether it's been washed or not. This can be significant, because those bones were in touch with, the corpse. It wasn't slaughtered Islamically after all. It's meter, and therefore it's najis. Although the bones itself are tahir, being in contact with the bones, and I'm sure there's a wet medium there somewhere, it would lead the bones to be najis. Not essentially najis, because the bones of such animals are tahir. It will be najis as a result of contact through a wet medium with dead components of the life-containing components of the dead animal, because the animal hasn't been slaughtered Islamically after all. So it's not the case that the animal is all tahir. So that's why we have this class now. So the animal hasn't been slaughtered Islamically. You know it's from the bones. The first thing you have to ascertain is whether the bones have been washed or not. Now, some people may say, well, I'm sure in X, Y, or Z country they wash all the bones, this, that, and the other. It doesn't matter. This has to be substantiated before you, though. Assuming it's substantiated before you that it has been washed, that those bones have been washed, now you go through istihala. Does istihala occur or not? If it's substantiated before you that istihala does occur, it would be permissible to consume, and it would be tahir anyway, because those bones were washed. So they were tahir when the gelatin was extracted from it. And they're edible because istihala has occurred. If istihala hadn't have occurred, well, you're still left with parts of an animal which hasn't been slaughtered. Therefore, it would be haram to consume. But since istihala has occurred, it's permissible to consume. It doesn't go through those branches of whether the istihala has occurred in qalil water or not, because those bones were washed, so they're tahir. Now, if istihala has not been substantiated before one, then you have to ask, does istihlaq arise or not? Now here, when you want to extract the gelatin from the bones which have been washed, therefore the bone is tahir. I mean, it was tahir anyway, but since it's established that it has been washed, one is more safe now, because there's no risk of it being into contact through a wet medium with other parts of the body which haven't been slaughtered. So here, the bones which are tahir, they are tahir because they've been washed too. If istihlaq, when they're mixed with something to produce the final product, if istihlaq does result, then all the traces of that bone has now vanished. And since it was tahir to start off with, okay, then what will result at the end would be permissible to consume. But if istihlaq were not to arise, here, although it's tahir, you can't consume it, because you're consuming parts of an animal that you know hasn't been slaughtered Islamically. Okay, so that's one difference. Now let's say if it's substantiated that the animal Okay, you're not certain that this animal has been washed. The bones have been washed. You don't know. Or even if you doubt whether or not the bones have been washed, in either case, the same ruling applies. So either if you know that they haven't been washed, or you're not sure, there's doubt as to whether or not it hasn't been washed, the rulings are the same, and they are this. If istihala does arise, the same scenarios where those branches which we applied to porcine gelatin, did the istihala occur in qalil water, in core water? These apply here, because since you know that they haven't been washed, or you doubt that they've been washed or not, you have to assume that they're najis, and that going into contact with the water makes the qalil water all najis, and the same branches that we used with the porcine gelatin apply here. Now, if istihala does not arise, though, now you have to ask, does istihlaq arise or not? And with istihlaq, even if it does arise, it would be najis, because it goes through a wet muzaf medium most probably, and you won't be able to consume it. If istihlaq doesn't arise, it will also be najis, and you won't be able to consume it because it's parts of an animal that you know has not been slaughtered. I mean, if istihlaq does arise, the problem of why you can't consume it is something else. But here, if istihlaq doesn't arise, well, you're consuming parts of the animal that haven't been slaughtered Islamically, and that's not allowed. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa alayhi.